I wanted to start by saying we are recording this session, so we will be making the content available on our website in the current days, so that's including this recording and the slides as well. So I want to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the country and the lands on which we are joining from today. I want to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. At ARENA, we recognise the ongoing connection that we have to land across the Australia and Torres Strait Islands, and the connection that our projects have and the ongoing impact that we play. So next slide, please. So this is the agenda for today. We're just going to be going through a quick walkthrough of ARENA, and then we're going to run through the program specifics. So yeah, thank you. We'll push on to the next slide there. So for those of you that don't know, ARENA is the Australian Renewable Energy Agency. We were established in 2012, and we are a grant funding agency, and our purpose is to support the global transition to net zero emissions by accelerating the pace of pre-commercial innovation to the benefit of Australian consumers, businesses and workers, and we do that through the provision of grant funding. So next slide, please, Will. So this is just a quick snapshot of the work that we have done over the past decade or more at ARENA. So we have invested a bit over $3 billion across a bit over 800 projects. We funded projects right across the country, and we fund everything from sort of earlier stage studies, R&D, through to demonstrations and deployments. There's a range of technologies that are listed here on the slide. These kind of reflect the historical investments that we've made over time. And so today we fund sort of a subset of these technologies through our various programs and investment streams. So next slide, please. So we'll move on. So I'm going to jump into the specifics of the Future Made in Australia Innovation Fund. So some of you may be familiar with the broader Future Made in Australia agenda or plan of the current government. So that is a broader $22 billion package that was announced a couple of years ago and is really the centrepiece to the Future Made in Australia agenda. The Innovation Fund is just one pillar within that. And so the broader Future Made in agenda is really focusing on how do we enable economic security across Australia, making sort of reasonable and sound investments into innovation across a range of different areas, investing in people and places, with a goal as well of making Australia a renewable energy superpower. So there's 5 priorities across the Future Made in Australia agenda, of which the Innovation Fund will tackle 3. And so those are green metals, low carbon liquid fuels, and renewable energy technology manufacturing. So renewable hydrogen and critical minerals, whilst are not captured specifically in their own streams in the Innovation Fund, are areas that ARENA can fund through alternative programs. And so under the Innovation Fund of the program, we have $1.5 billion in grant funding available, and that's to support pre-commercial innovation and deployment of the technologies that we'll be discussing today. So next slide, please. So this is a bit of a snapshot of what we're trying to achieve broadly in the program. So the overall objective of the fund is to support innovative projects that benefit Australia's transition to net zero through development, deployment and commercialisation of the technologies that are prioritised across our various focus areas. And so we are looking to do that through a number of high-level outcomes that are then refined through each of the focus areas that we'll touch on a little later on. And so we do that, we're looking to increase the uptake of the various technologies through innovation and commercialisation, improving Australia's capability and capacity, supporting stronger supply chains. We recognise the importance that this plays, and as is common with a number of ARENA programs, to improve knowledge, skills and workforce participation as well. So next slide. So going a little bit deeper, this is sort of the Innovation Fund on a page. So as I said, we've got 3 technology kind of or focus area streams, those being the first of which is green metals, which has $750 million available, and there is a webinar on that specific session tomorrow afternoon. You can find the information on our website. We have the low carbon liquid fuels stream, which has $250 million available to it. And then the focus of this session today, which is on the renewable energy technology manufacturing stream. So we have an initial tranche of $200 million that is available now and open and ready for applications, with a total allocation of $500 million that will be informed and determined at a later date. And I'll provide a little bit more detail on that later on. So We are prioritising a number of technologies in this stream, being energy storage and thermal energy storage, transport and EV infrastructure, including heavy vehicles, zero emissions vehicles, hydrogen infrastructure for both production and storage, and transmission and distribution infrastructure, amongst others. So we'll move on there, Will, please. So I just wanted to do some key features of the program, and I'll go into some of these areas a little later on in more detail. So firstly, acknowledging that this has been a joint effort in terms of design collaboration with our departmental colleagues at DQ, Ditrica and DISA. And so we've worked with those departments across various elements of the program. And so our primary partners for the renewable energy technology manufacturing focus area is with DISA, so our industry colleagues. And so touching on how we have, I guess, designed some of the parameters of this program. So we've introduced a concept kind of around this streamed-based funding model with an innovation and deployment stream, and I'll touch on a little bit more detail on that in the next slide. As I've mentioned, we've got focus areas with priorities, those being green metals, low carbon liquid fuels, and renewable energy manufacturing. This program has been designed to be very open and broad, and to support that, we are adopting a collaborative approach, which means that ARENA can work with you as an applicant to firm up your proposal in order to make sure that it's as successful as it can be. And we have introduced this idea of concept endorsement. And so that is something new that you may not have seen in previous programs, but it's something that we've been sort of trialing for a little while. And really the intent of that is to get you to make contact with somebody at ARENA before you hit submit, so that we can provide you that advice on whether the project you're proposing is a good fit. Is there anything else that we think you should be including or considering? Have you got everything that you need? And the goal is to be able to get you to a quick yes or a no, which we know saves everyone time, effort and energy. And so that you're connected with a person. It's not really there to kind of necessarily create too many roadblocks. It's quite a simple process to get endorsement. It's simply contacting, being connected with an ARENA member who will then give you the thumbs up or thumbs down if you're ready to go ahead. And so I'll touch on the other areas a little later on through some of our other criteria. So next slide, please, Will. So as I said, we've introduced this idea of an innovation stream and a deployment stream, which you'll see reflected in the guidelines. The reason why we have done this is really based on previous learnings from other programs that we've delivered, where we recognise when we have a program that is this broad in that it can fund a broad range of activities and project types across a number of different areas, that being able to take a more risk-based approach to our assessment means that we can make decisions in a more accelerated way where it needs to be made and apply appropriate diligence where it's required on some of those more complex decisions. And so what we would expect to see is through the endorsement process, you'd be given some advice as to where we expect your project to sit. Does it kind of fall within the innovation stream, or does it fall within the deployment stream? And we've tried to put some differentiators here on the slide. So in innovation, we would expect it to be an earlier stage project. It might be a study, likely to be sort of a smaller scale deployment. And we don't expect those projects to be generating any revenue or not significant revenue, if at all. Versus deployment stream projects, which we expect to be later stage, a larger scale, likely to be generating some revenue, although we recognise would still require grant support in order to be successful. We have not put a dollar figure against these streams to determine which one you might fit into based on your grant amount, because we recognise that there's a huge differential between, say, for example, projects coming through the green metals area versus, for example, the renewable energy technology manufacturing. So we've been quite intentional on not putting a dollar figure there, but certainly we can provide further guidance on that. And as I said, the goal here is to make sure that we're right fitting those decisions against the stage, so that we can get those early stage projects moving faster, and the projects that require additional diligence, giving the time to do that. So next slide, thanks. The Future Made in Australia is one of the few programs that is captured specifically under the Future Made in Australia Act. And so it is designated specifically within that Act as FMA support. And so because of that designation, we are, I guess, required to comply with that act in the way that we deliver the program. And this is specifically with regard to the community benefit principles. And so as decision makers across ARENA, so our board, minister, our CEO, etc., they will have to consider how does the project address the community benefit principles in terms of making that decisions. And so we've just outlined the current requirements that are specified in the Act. And so that is the requirement for a Future Made in Australia plan, and it's in writing, and it describes how the project would benefit the community. And to note that rules may be made in the future that would impact the program, but we provide further guidance on that. So next slide, please, Will. So here are the community benefit principles as described in the Act, in the FMA Act. We have also outlined these in the program guidelines. I'm not going to go into in-depth detail on each of these now. You can certainly go back and read them in your own time, but they capture a range of initiatives, and these are being applied right across the Future Made in Australia landscape. So next slide, please. I recognise that this might be a little bit overwhelming for some entities, particularly if you've got an earlier stage project, so we are here to help. Important to note that DISA has been running a consultation process with regards to the CBPs over the last month or so, and we are expecting some results to be shared when ready, and we'll be considering how we adopt those in the program. As it stands today, we're fairly agnostic as to what projects may do to commit to the community benefit principles. And we've got some resources here to help you get some ideas, to help understand what's currently available for you as resources and knowledge sharing information in the market, how they apply to different community groups. But in terms of sort of some examples of the kinds of things that we might expect from projects, could be having a relevant business policy or workforce policy that outlines how you're going to create a safe and welcome environment for your workers. It might be learning and development programs. It might be how you, for example, in a facility might consider how you might structure shifts and in finding ways to employ a diverse workforce. But certainly we're very open and happy to work with you in terms of how you might structure that plan in order to get the best results. But do keep an ear out, because we do expect further information to be coming out soon following that DISA consultation process. Next slide, please. Just going to take a moment now just to run through our broad assessment process. So next slide, please, Will. So this is ARENA's assessment process on a page. So as we said, we have introduced the requirement for endorsement before you hit submit. And so that really starts at that kind of high-level concept stage. So what we're looking for you is to fill in a form, tell us a little bit about your project and what it is, and then we'll be able to provide you some advice as to whether or not we think it's aligned with what the program's trying to achieve and the priorities that we've set. From there, if given the thumbs up, you'll be allowed to submit possibly an EOI, or if we think that there's a good case to accelerate the project, particularly under those innovation stream projects, then we might suggest that you move straight through to a one-stage application process. But either way, they look fairly similar. There's a very simple form to fill in, not too many details. A lot of our focus will be on what we're calling the project plan attachment, and that's where you'll be telling us about your project and how it aligns to the guidelines and the merit criteria that we've set out. Excuse me. From there, we have our applications assessed by the ARENA advisory panel. They provide feedback, guidance and advice to ARENA and for yourselves in terms of trying to find ways to improve and refine your project. And if it is endorsed, then we'll take that project through for funding approval. And then if that is approved, we'll take it through to contract execution. And so depending on the complexity of the project, how motivated you are, that can be anything from a few months to 6+ months, but really our goal is to try to accelerate you as best as we can. Next slide, please, Will. So I'm going to touch on now the eligibility criteria before handing over to my colleague, Will. So this is the eligibility criteria on a page, not too many, which we've tried to simplify down again for this program. Next slide, please, Will. So eligibility criteria A, which is around the entities that are eligible to apply. So all entities must have a current ABN and then fall into one of the following categories. So you could be an Australian corporation under the Corporations Act, or a business entity, could be an Australian state or territory owned enterprise, such as, for example, a DNSP. local governments or organisations that are purposed with representing local governments, and Australian universities and research organisations, including CRCs, are also eligible to apply for funding under this program. Next slide, please, Will. In terms of being an eligible project, because this is a very broad program and we're covering a number of different areas, we've kept these fairly high level. So all we require is that the project primarily take place in Australia. The starting TRL of the technology that you're investigating has to be TRL 3 or above. So that means that we can provide funding to develop, for example, a prototype. And the technology needs to be something that we can lawfully fund under the Act. So that includes renewable energy technologies, as well as enabling technologies, energy efficiency, and electrification technologies. Next slide, Will. So in terms of the other criteria, I'll just move through these fairly quickly. What we require is that you have the appropriate IP to undertake the works that you're seeking funding for, and that you comply with the Workplace Gender Equality Act, that you're not an organisation listed as a terrorist or not contravening Australian sanction laws. And so these are mandatory requirements, pretty typical requirements for anyone seeking government funding. And then we have some other requirements that are outlined in the funding agreement, including compliance with the Modern Slavery Act and recognising that we may have the right to request information around your climate performance. But again, the ARENA team can provide further information on these. So I might hand over, I think at that point, Will, to yourself to run through the merit criteria.
Sure. Thanks, Lauren. So hi everyone. As a quick introduction, my name is Will Reeves. I'm an investment manager in the investments and portfolio group here with Lauren, and work together closely on the overall development of the fund itself. So if Lauren just referred to the eligibility criteria, which is around the type of applicant, I'm going to run through now the merit criteria, which is related to the actual assessment of a project once it's considered eligible. 5 merit criteria, which if anyone's familiar with ARENA is very similar across all of our programs, and we'll speak to each of these now. So merit A, how the project contributes to the technology focus areas, objectives and outcomes. We can refer to the specific RETM focus areas shortly, but this is just really considering the overall alignment of to the program under which it's applying, any specific metrics in terms of emission reduction, for example, job creation, other goals, and then also the specific innovation potential or commercialization of the project scope itself. And I think that is just ensuring that we're making sure we have alignment to the overarching goal of the innovation fund itself. And key within this is how it contributes to the confirming affirmative action in accordance with the community benefit principles, which Lauren has already referred to. Merit B is related to who will actually be executing the project. And that is related to their capability and capacity. So what expertise, experience, track record in undertaking similar projects of this nature, and as well as any other, well, I guess that would be related to the specific applicant themselves, but also any members of project consortium. And then related to that, the capacity of applicants and where is there sufficient resources available? And I think importantly here, if there are any current resource gaps, what is the pathway to those being addressed? And this will also consider the ability to deliver the activities related to the community benefit principles. Merit C then speaks to the actual execution of the project itself. And within here, this is the overall project design, consideration of schedules, work streams, timelines, importantly, consideration of risk, personnel, delivery, technical, financial, and that can be considered through a specific risk management plan. But again, where there are risks or potential gaps, how those are being addressed and mitigated. Important to call out here as well is the risk of negotiating and executing a funding agreement. So highly encourage potential applicants to review our template funding agreement and the specific legal T's and C's within that, and any potential departures can be managed through a compliance table submission. Other compliance with requirements set out in part 4 of the guidelines. So that was just quite specific, and obviously encourage anyone to view this webinar in conjunction with the program guidelines themselves. On Merit C, I think it's important to call out that, as Lauren alluded to earlier, within this program, we have an innovation and then a deployment stream. Within the innovation stream, expecting potentially smaller style projects and deployment larger demonstration style projects, which might be associated with a larger grant, and hence there would be a varying level of assessment undertaken within those projects and varying level of rigor expected within Merit C. And so that will kind of link to consideration of how advanced a project is within its licensing, permitting, any regulatory processes that would be needed to undertake the project, as well as the actual ability to procure the supply, procure the equipment and supply chain considerations within that. And as Lauren alluded to as well, different expectations around the Future Made in Australia innovation plan, which would to the style of projects. So expecting a level of pragmatism within this as well. Merit D is related to the financial viability and co-funding commitment. So key consideration here is what is the need for ARENA funding and the specific amount of funding that is requested, or another way of thinking about it of what would happen if no ARENA funding was provided to this project. Equally here, we're looking at the quality and completeness of the project budget, evidence assumptions, any supporting quotes, etc., as well as a project cash flow profile. So Lauren referred to, I guess, the pre-revenue nature of a lot of projects, so consideration of there, and then as well as the financial co-contributions being provided and demonstration of evidence of an applicant's ability to fund those co-contributions. On the accuracy and economics, looking at specific financial return metrics and how future activities could proceed without grant funding and relevant industry benchmarks. On the financial model, definitely encourage applicants to work with ARENA as part of this, and understanding different projects will require a differing level of sophistication within the models presented, but I think it's key to be able to identify and sensitize key variables to view project returns, and that's primarily thinking about IRR and the NPV of project cash flows. Merit E is the key one for ARENA, or ARENA's overall return on its investments related to knowledge sharing, and that's specifically how the value of the knowledge generated by the project will contribute to the technology focus areas, and so highly related, or related within Merit A. Key within this is the resources and audience. So what specific audiences are going to be targeted or benefit from the knowledge that will be generated through the project, and that's including appropriate allocation of resources to deliver these knowledge sharing outcomes. Methodology is a commitment from the applicant to deploy the appropriate resources to produce the outputs that would be expected, and then the extent to which data, information, and lessons learned will be made publicly available, as well as any constraints that might prevent the sharing of this information itself. So that brings close to the, I guess, overall program overview, and we'll now jump into the specific technology focus area that is the renewable energy technology manufacturing. So starting at a very high level, over the first half of 2025, we undertook a period of targeted consultation in the market, questions primarily revolving around key pain points that were being observed within the market, and hence how we could really try and design a program that was fit for purpose to try and address these. We spoke to entities from across the priority sectors: battery storage, thermal, hydrogen, transmission line, but also consideration of EV charging and infrastructure, but equally around consultancies and other market bodies. Key discussion topics within this included the project scope, so consideration that the RETM has quite a wide scope and can span consideration of technology development, but also manufacturing capacity and consideration around feasibility versus deployment. Naturally, within this, large focus around the role of R&D within it and how we could structure funding to reflect that, and equally innovation and need to differentiate how many industries need manufacturing support, but ensuring we maintain that innovation fund lens And then finally, capability and capacity links to the point that I just made earlier in the fund would be seeking on manufacturing capability and capacity not being the same. So that then gives us an overall overview of the RETM focus area itself and kind of the key features that were then included within the program on the back of the consultation match funding model, which is consistent with most ARENA programs. On the minimum grant ask, as Lauren alluded to, minimum 250K grant ask, no maximum grant ask. And again, that's made in consultation with ARENA. The focus areas themselves, which I'll speak to shortly, are around supporting manufacturing innovation, but equally the development of Australian manufacturing capabilities and facilities. And then project type, just understanding that this will include a broad scope from feasibility studies to support manufacturing readiness to overall demonstrations and development or even expansion of facilities themselves. The RETM outcomes, this is the key piece within the focus area document itself. And so projects funded will be required to contribute to one or more of the following outcomes. So supporting product and innovation and use of advanced manufacturing techniques to produce renewable energy technologies, expanding Australia's renewable energy manufacturing capabilities of critical technologies, renewable energy development capabilities with a focus on solutions that can support and accelerate emissions reduction, and then increasing or improving supply chain resilience of eligible technologies. And overall, this is designed to continue to position Australia as a leader of the net zero economy and driving private investment into resilient, future-focused industries. The focus areas themselves sit within the renewable energy technology manufacturing priority, and they aim to progress the technology and manufacturing readiness of eligible renewable technologies. So as you'll see on the slide here, two focus areas, the first of which is around supporting manufacturing innovation and commercialisation. So this is one that I would think around tech pilots and the development and trial of tech using innovative and advanced manufacturing techniques. And then the knowledge on the back of this is around enhancing our knowledge base, workforce skills, and industry capability that we need to manufacture renewable energy technologies. Focus Area 2 revolves around the development of Australian manufacturing capabilities and facilities to support the transition to net zero. So I think quite a key distinction within Focus Area 1, and that's around deploying advanced manufacturing techniques to drive step change improvements. This could also include scaling or scale up of manufacturing capacity by developing and upgrading facilities or integrating with existing production lines to deliver critical renewable energy technologies. But still within here, consideration of feasibility and feed studies to assess opportunities and integration of new products. A key question that did come up within consultation was the type of applicants that are eligible within this. And as Lauren alluded to, Australian universities and research groups are eligible, but equally manufacturers or technology OEMs, industry bodies, startups, and then knowledge sharing focused consortia. And so while we've spoken a lot about what is in scope, I think important to consider what will be out of scope and how the key priority technologies were arrived at. So the priority technologies themselves, they were done in consultation with our own internal knowledge sharing base through our strategy team, but also the targeted consultation and market gap analysis. Just areas where we see large opportunities for innovation, but also emission reduction and overall aligned with the purposes of the program itself. Battery storage, thermal storage, hydrogen, so including technologies such as electrolyzers, EV charging and the associated infrastructure, but also equally transmission and distribution network technologies, and finally battery electric vehicle goods and omni buses. Any technology or project to be fundable will have to be at a minimum TRL 3 or higher. And this could include projects such as manufacturing readiness studies, but also facility development and equipment upgrades. You see in a bright red box there, not fundable. I think the key call out there is around solar PV and modules, but would direct anyone with potential projects to our solar sunshot or other solar focused funding programs, and equally electrification and decarbonisation facilities through renewable energy technology integration, not the focus of the Innovation Fund itself, but encourage you to look at the other funding programs that ARENA has available. Another question that has came up through period of consultation is how does the Innovation Fund and specifically the Renewable Energy Technology Manufacturing Priority differ from our Advancing Renewables program, which is more ARENA's flagship funding program. And so you probably can tell that within the RETM, it's very much a focused project scope, focusing on enabling manufacturing capacity and capability in Australia. Within the ARP, projects have TRL 4 or higher, whereas within the Innovation Fund, links to the name, we can consider projects at TRL 3. This allows us to enable earlier stage manufacturing initiatives and links to the R&D or even university consortia element. On the funding method, typically within our ARP program, it's a two-stage funding process unless a study or quite a small grant request, whereas as Lauren alluded to in the Innovation Fund, we've made a conscious effort to engage the deployment and innovation stream-based approach, trying to ultimately get an accelerated funding outcome where there is that possibility. Within ARP, there is not a specific need for the consideration of the community benefits principle, whereas within the Innovation Fund, this is quite a key element of the overall due diligence. And then unsurprisingly, yeah, the ARP sector agnostic with exceptions, whereas within the Innovation Fund, we have a specific focus on the priority sector technologies and alluded to previously how we've tried to identify those. So that is the overview of the technology focus areas themselves. On the key dates, so the Innovation Fund launched in December 2025. We are now doing a couple of webinars over the next few days to provide that information. Online applications are officially open. So as Lauren alluded to, if there is a potential scope or project that you think would be eligible for funding, encourage you to link to the funding advice page that's available on the ARENA website. That then brings us to a period of Q&A. You should please be able to use the Q&A function within Teams. In doing so, I see my colleague Lauren's come back online, and my colleague Carl, who is the general manager in our grid and storage impact team, should also be joining shortly. Hi, Carl. So if people could start to use the Q&A function, we can do a bit of back and forth. I will note that unable to chat to specific project specifics in such a large forum, but any questions will all be taken on notice and we can make updates to our FAQ document as necessary as well. So we can take a look through and just wait to see if any questions come through. There's a question that's come up on who could be my ARENA contact. Lauren, could I pass that one to you, please?
Yes, it's a good question. So as you've seen, particularly within this stream, there are a broad range of different technologies that we may consider. And so when you submit the funding advice or the contact us form, and that will actually come into our system, and then from there we'll be able to assign you to the appropriate team that has the knowledge and experience and expertise associated with the technology that you're interested in. So that really helps us to make sure that we can appropriately assess your concept and to be able to give you the right advice. So that would be, so you'd be connected with somebody who sits within our investment team. So the likes of Will, myself, or Carl, we can provide you with that kind of support.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren. Specific question around the minimum grant for innovation being 250K, wondering if there's a minimum also for deployment grants. So apologies if there was any confusion there. On the RETM folks area, it's a minimum 250K across the priority area. So while there's not a minimum specifically across innovation versus deployment, we would expect that deployment projects by their nature would have a larger funding requirement. Uh, Question again, Lauren, perhaps for you, in terms of funding, what is the ratio of funding and does it take in-kind funds?
So I mean that's a little bit hard one to be specific on because we don't necessarily have I guess a specific ratio that you must meet. Typically what we say is we like to see matched funding, but we are, we will consider, as I said, the kind of the project itself, the level of funding that's required. So ARENA's goal is always to provide the least amount of funding that we can to ensure that the project is success subject to any commercial returns being made. So that's going to look really different if you're comparing, say, a later stage deployment project versus something that might be an early stage study or R&D. And so we take that all into consideration. So what I would suggest is if you've got a specific need, come and talk to us. We are willing to be a little bit flexible on the match funding requirement, but obviously that's subject to need. And yes, in-kind funding can be considered as part of your contribution as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren. Carl, perhaps a question for you. Is there an overlap of Battery Breakthrough Initiative and Energy Storage section in FMA?
Yeah, there's a little bit of an overlap, and to the extent that there is an overlap, effectively BBI should be prioritised. So I think there's a carve out within the Innovation Fund that says unless you're eligible for BBI. So for anything that's sort of at that borderline, please do talk to us and we'll figure out which program it sits in.
Awesome.
Maybe just one more point there. A key differentiator would be that BBI is for TRL 6 and above. So for TRLs that are at that sort of 5 or 6 level, that's something that we'd like to get alignment on to determine where our project might sit.
Awesome. Thanks, Carl. Lauren, question here around expected time frame from submitting a full application through to finding out the grant outcome.
Yeah, so from submitting a full application, I mean, it really comes down to the standard of that application. We do assess projects on a rolling monthly basis. So depending when you come in and on the cycle, if you were to submit, it takes about a month roughly for the application to be assessed. And then we look to turn around feedback relatively quickly, depending on the stage and scale of the project as to what that approval pathway looks like. So under the ARENA Act, if you're seeking, for example, over $50 million in funding, then we must seek approval from the relevant minister. If it's sitting underneath that, excuse me, if it's sitting underneath that, then the approval would be done internally through ARENA. Depends if, for example, if you require board approval, that might take another month. But typically, we would hope to have feedback to you within, 2 to 3 months from when you initially submit. If you do have needs to accelerate and it's a smaller project, then we would look to try to, make that a tighter window. Again, it really comes down to any feedback that you might also need to address between submission and final approval. And so, part of that comes down to how motivated you are as an applicant to address that feedback promptly.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren. Question on how will low TRL innovation stream projects successfully demonstrate community benefit? So I might take a first pass and then Lauren, keen for you to add anything in. So I think it's really important. It's a really good question to call out that the community benefit principles won't be absolute in the way that they're applied to projects, and as expect, projects of different style would be able to provide different community benefits. And so there won't be a blanket expectation around project must create X jobs or, Y benefit to the community. It will be, try to say a level of pragmatism that will be applied in the assessment of those projects. Lauren, did you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, so as I said, this was a key area of consideration for us in terms of the ask of what we were being asked to deliver through this program, and needing to align to that broader Future Made in Australia agenda, and the Future Made in Australia Act, which captures the community benefit principles. As I said, we are expecting further guidance to come out in the coming weeks or months regarding how those principles will be applied across a broad range of projects. So absolutely, what Will said is right. We we recognise that the outcomes that might be delivered by a large-scale deployment are going to look very, very different from a lower TRL sort of R&D project, and we would take that into consideration. But regardless, what we are focused on is ensuring that in any project there's, for example, a safe workplace, that where possible we're considering what can be done to strengthen those connections across workplaces, and making sure that we're getting more diversity within to the broader energy sector as well. So all those things still important considerations, but we're not necessarily expecting you to be going out and employing 100 people. That's certainly not something that we're going to require.
Thanks, Lauren. Carl, perhaps a question for you. Would the expansion of a graphene manufacturing line, where graphene is used as a lithium battery and therefore not eligible under BBI, be considered eligible under the renewable energy manufacturing technology?
Yeah, it certainly would be. Obviously, there's lots of merit considerations there, and that's project-specific details that be happy to discuss.
Awesome. Thanks, Carl. Just seeing if there's any more questions coming through. Lauren, perhaps a question around knowledge sharing. So what are the knowledge sharing expectations where there is significant IP involved?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a question that we get quite a lot because we recognise that can be a little bit fraught for people. So as I said, in the eligibility criteria, we do ask that you do have appropriate access to the IP that you might need for the project. But when it comes to the knowledge sharing aspects of that, we certainly aren't asking you to share any of your company secrets or your protected IP. That's not the intent. For a program like this, again, it's going to vary between projects, but what we're keen to understand is what, for example, might be the lessons that you've learnt in developing your project, or any barriers that you're overcoming that others might be able to benefit from in terms of their understanding. And that's going to look really different, between projects. We may, for example, ask you to participate in a roundtable or an arena-led event in order to share your learnings, maybe do a presentation, something like that. We are going through a process at the moment of refining what knowledge sharing deliverables look like. And so what I would recommend is, if you've got any concerns, that's something you can certainly raise with your investment manager or your client manager, and they can provide advice and guidance onto the sorts of things that we would expect, but certainly no sharing of significant IP.
Awesome. Thank you, Lauren. Carl, will this program support typical development costs for a project which aims to demonstrate the scale up of a pre-commercial battery storage technology?
Yeah, I think probably not. Always project-specific details is relevant here, but I think the purpose of this program is more focused on developing the technology and the manufacturing techniques. So commercial demonstrations of new battery technologies tend to more sit in our baseline advancing renewables program, but would need to understand more specifics of the project to give a firmer response.
Completely understand. Question here, maybe I'll take a first pass and Lauren, please add in. So will technologies matured overseas but new to Australia be considered under the innovation stream or the deployment stream? First initial thoughts is that it will depend on the nature of the project and the technology itself. So if it is a first of a kind demonstration at a small pilot scale level, then by nature of it, we would expect that to come through the innovation stream. Where it is very much, let's say, an established technology with strong track record overseas, but newly integrated in an Australian processing environment, for example, we could see that having a potential pathway under the deployment, but the easiest answer would be to make sure you're just talking to your arena representative within that, and they would be able to give you guidance, because it will be related to the specifics of the project itself. Lauren, is there a maximum allowable time frame or time limit for completion of the project?
Yeah, so in short, no, we haven't specified how long projects should take, but of course our goal is to ensure that we are getting results and outcomes as quickly as possible. So that's something that we will consider under merit criteria C. So how well have you designed your project in terms of things like scheduling and timeframes? So we recognise, that there are many limitations that can mean that a project needs to take a particular amount of time, particularly when you're talking about various supply chains and having to get, meet procurement windows, etc., things like that. So no specific time frame. However, it is something that we will consider as part of our merit assessment.
Awesome. Thank you. And maybe another question, how does ARP and RETM interact? That is, can you get funding from both programs for the same initiative?
That's a good question. In short, I would say no. That's typically when you come to ARENA, you would be seeking funding through what we kind of consider one program or one funding vehicle. It would be, you may, for example, come through in stages across different programs. So there might be a scenario where perhaps you've received feasibility or feed funding through the ARP, and now you're looking to scale up, and part of that focus in this instance is a manufacturing focus or development focus that is better aligned to the Innovation Fund. Then we might provide that guidance that your next project is best coming through this vehicle. But I can't see a scenario where we would fund a project through both at the same time. There would have to be very distinct scopes, and we would consider them to be two very separate applications.
Awesome, thank you. Should the project proposal seek an industry partner to contribute in kind or cash, or the research organizations only is still okay? So a question on the kind of contributions in kind versus cash often comes up. I think naturally related to merit D, the more that you can show your overall consortia's commitment to the project, the more meritorious the project will be. That is not to say that it must be cash, but sometimes there's a requirement or a consideration of making sure there's sufficient skin in the game from all participants within the consortia. So again, this would be quite project specific and will be relayed through your ARENA contact.
I think just maybe the second part of that question, which seems to be very much focused on if you're a research organisation, I think kind of the crux of the question as well, do you have to have an industry partner contributing something? I think you're right, Will, it's still very project specific. However, what we are really interested to see is what's that kind of future sort of market need, commercialisation potential, how, what does that pathway look like? And do you have, as a research institution, the right capabilities within your team to ensure that there's that future progression? And so if you're very early stage, absolutely, we love to see industry partners involved, or at least some pathway to kind of being able to take that project out of the university or research setting. And so that might mean future plans for a spin out, for example. We often see that. The extent as to what that partner needs to be contributing, that, we can certainly take that on a case-by-case basis. It obviously does help, but we recognise that there can be hesitancy early on for industry partners to put significant cash behind something that's not really proven. So we recognise that risk. But really what we're interested in is the what next. And so having that industry capability in there really does help to enable that.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Lauren. Good add. Naturally, then a question that I should probably answer is, it sounds like talking to your ARENA contact will be important. How do you initiate contact? So earlier on in the presentation, there was a link, and we can make that available to the funding advice page within the ARENA website. And this will take you to a portal where you'll be asked a couple of questions around your project and potential scope. And then that will be allocated to the appropriate ARENA contact or member of the team that will be able to take that on. Looking through for some other questions. Lauren, is there a fixed window for benefit realization and project delivery timeframes, or is this dependent on the project scope?
I'm going to assume that maybe is in relation to the community benefit principles themselves, possibly, unless it's talking more generally about program benefits. In short, no, there isn't a fixed window as to when we expect those benefits to be realised. If anything, we take more of a portfolio view when it comes to certain outcomes, because we recognise in most instances, one particular project on its own may not be enough to necessarily, move the needle on particular benefits being realised. I think if you look at from the community benefit piece, when you're talking about specific regions, for example, again, that's in some instances it might be one project that is enough, but often it might mean that multiple projects need to be acting in sync. And so all those kinds of things we would be considering in terms of what it is you might be realising and the scale and the impact that you might have. So I think if you were claiming that in, for example, 10 years after your project had been completed, that these are the benefits that we'd be realising, then that might be a little bit of a stretch. So obviously, if we can, scale what those benefits might look like over time, that's all things that we can take into consideration and review.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren. And thank you, Tanya, for linking the program website as well within the Q&A so people can refer to that, and that'll have the link to the funding advice. Looking through, I think that might be no other Q&A coming through. One question around what would be an example of a knowledge sharing focused consortia. And so I think the key consideration within this is so the main outcome for ARENA will be around the return on investment in being knowledge sharing itself. There are certain entities that are well placed to provide those reports and provide the resourcing that will allow you to truly generate that knowledge sharing. And so that could be through a CRC that we referred to, a research organization, or a university. And I think it just links to the broad scope within the program, that there'll be deployment style projects, but there'll be equally very early stage technology innovation, and the knowledge sharing will be different across these. And so important to consider if there's a specific knowledge sharing agent, for example, that can be used to better facilitate this. Will this recording be provided to the attendees, confirming that it will be recorded following the closing of the webinar? It will go up on the website on that same link that Tanya posted earlier. Just looking through. Lauren, Carl, if you see any ones pop up, but as I miss them. Oh, awesome. Will PV recycling be considered under this scheme, even if the technology is non-Australian? Lauren, I'll pass to you.
Yeah, in short, no. So at this stage, we don't have sort of direct consideration for PV recycling. As you said, solar PV is one of the excluded technologies under this program. And we do have other, so you may want to look at the Advancing Renewables program, and because that is aligned to our various priorities across ARENA, which we didn't touch on in this webinar. But one of those priorities is ultra low cost solar. And so we do have an opportunity to consider the role of PV recycling within that broader value chain. And so that would be where I would suggest that you would look if you have a project of that nature.
Awesome. Thank you. I can answer a question that has come up through what happens to ARENA grant funding if the recipient company undergoes a change in ownership, particularly if the new owner is a foreign entity. So this question, I would encourage you to refer to our template funding agreement that has specific change in control provisions. It is something that has happened in the past through ARENA projects, but specifically you'll be able to note in the T's and C's, there's quite explicit instructions or considerations within that.
So I will.
Oh, sorry, Lauren.
No, I was just going to say, I will say we are getting some very specific project-related questions coming through. And so just to say that, we will make touch with anyone who's provided something, a project-specific question. As I said, we're not going to give project-specific advice in this session today, just because of the unique nature of it. But if you do have questions, please do reach out and we can try to answer those for you.
Yeah, it's a good call out. Thank you, Lauren. And yeah, as we've said, all of this Q&A, while not being specifically published, the webinar itself will be published. And if there's a need for us to make updates to the FAQs that are available on the website to reflect these Q&A sessions, that will also be undertaken. And Tanya, thank you for posting that link as well. Lauren, Carl, is there any other Q&A that you're seeing, or might all be too project specific? Oh, Lauren, you're on mute.
Just a note that we have received lots of questions that we haven't been able to cover. So apologies if we haven't got to your question. We're doing our best to filter through a long list to focus on the more valuable questions, but we can't necessarily see everything because of the rate of which new questions is coming in.
So I've just pulled one out, which is if what happens to the grant funding if the recipient company undergoes a change of ownership, and particularly if the new owner is a foreign entity. So that would be captured. So if there was a change of, we consider a change of control during the course of the project, that would be, so we do have mechanisms for that within the funding agreement. And certainly, if there was a change of entity and it was not an Australian entity, then that would be a question for us, because obviously that is an eligibility criteria under the program, sorry. So typically we like to see an Australian entity coming in, and whether that's a JV or something similar. But when there is a change of control, some of the questions that we consider that to be a material variation, for example, under the agreement. And so we will consider the merits of that change and the reasons for. And so if you do have, knowledge of a particular change that might be in the wings, the more that we can get some notice to be able to consider the impacts of that, then the better that we are able to manage it.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren. Noting that we are at time, I would propose to end the session there, unless there was anything else to add, Lauren, Carl.
No, I think at this point, as we said, please do reach out. We do have the 2 follow-on webinars tomorrow morning and tomorrow afternoon. You can find more information on that on our website. As I said, the first sort of 20 to 30 minutes of the content will be similar. We'll be going through the particulars of the program, and then we'll cover the particular streams in the second half of the session. So if you are interested in any alternative streams, please feel free to join and come along, but we will be making all content available on our website in the coming days or week.
Awesome. Perfect. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thank you, Lauren. Thanks, Carl.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone.